Hi, I'm Greg Moores, and welcome to Life Camp, where you'll meet extraordinary people for an extraordinary life. And today, we're talking about extraordinary maturity. Our guest is Dr. Jim Gagne. He's a physician specializing in internal medicine and addiction. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
What do you mean by extraordinary maturity?
What I mean is our culture sees people as being small children and, adolescents acting out their emotions all over the place. Then most of us turn it down, suppress it, and shut it off, and wind up frozen to some extent, and frustrated and feeling like we want out of this, that we can't express ourselves, we're caught. Extraordinary maturity is a way to get out of feeling caught, feeling needy, feeling overwhelmed, and getting into a space of fullness, of becoming source for yourself, of feeling full.
And you mentioned that your anger is the key to getting there.
Yes and no. Anger is a great example of this process, of the three possible ways of handling an emotion, and why, if you handle it in a certain way, it goes from something that's bad to something that's good. So
three ways.
Anger is something that we diss in our culture. In our culture, we think of anger the same way we thought of sex 50 years ago. Everybody walked around really prim and then did stuff in hiding, and it was all secret and dirty. Now it's like, man, we know more about ex-President Clinton's privates than we'd ever want to. Sex is all over the place, and most people have gotten to the point, well, it's a part of life, and sometimes it can be really neat. In fact, if you've ever had really good sex, you know that this is something that we can do as human beings. This is part of our basic equipment.
Sure.
This is something we can do. Extraordinary maturity, I think, is another basic human potential that there hasn't been a lot of support for in our culture. And so the reason I use anger is because it's an emotion that everybody is mad about and ashamed of. You don't want to get angry, because if you're angry, you're hostile, you're degrading, you're demeaning, you're dissing people, you're attacking or violent.
So in your experience with the clients you work with, right now anger is one of the big issues.
It certainly is. Actually, the larger issue isn't with the people who strut around and do the Rambo bit. It's people who are shut down and can't ever experience their anger and wind up frozen, paralyzed, and impotent, unable to act, and cut off from their power, and they keep getting used and taken over and screwed over. And
you mentioned there's a way to work with anger so that you're really appropriately maturing.
That's what I want to talk about today.
So what are the,
using anger as an example?
But everybody says anger is a bad behavior, and don't you dare get angry around me, or you got to better calm down your voice until we communicate.
Right.
So what are the different? There must be different kinds of anger.
Watch yourself, mister. You're getting into dangerous territory.
Right.
What I'm talking about is, in a lot of places in our culture, if I'm not only your boss, but I'm trying to control you, if I can figure out a way to keep you from getting angry or feeling your anger at all, then you're screwed. I've got you right under my thumb.
Really?
Sure. Because anger is where you say, wait a minute, this isn't working. I don't know what's wrong here, but something's wrong and I don't like this. I've got to do something. So if I can keep you from having that experience, you're going to lick my feet. So you'd want to have access to your anger, but you don't want to have it in a way that's harmful. So I want to engage in an experiment with you.
Okay.
I think the typical way that people engage in anger is either by dumping it or by burying it.
Okay.
So I think dumping anger in an inappropriate way is a little bit like pooping in your pants. So, I'm a doctor, I do body, so we're going to do a bodily function. Okay, so dumping anger is incontinence.
I see. So that's someone
losing control.
Got it. So that's someone that walks around and they're just like, they blow up online at the supermarket, or they yell at their spouse and their kids all the time.
Or wherever. It may be much more constructive.
They're a loose cannon.
Sure.
Okay.
And so they make messes that other people have to clean up.
Okay. So that's dumping.
That's one type.
Then there's suppressing.
Constipation.
Okay, got it. So now suppressing. Now I've heard that depression is anger turned inward.
Perfect. Good for you.
So
that's exactly right. That's
one
example.
If the behavior called anger is so wrong for me, I'll always control my anger and I'll stuff it.
Absolutely. And besides, it's not nice to get angry, and people won't like you.
Got it. So it's a social, all kinds of social
Sure.
values wrapped up in
So a
that.
lot of people are socialized and trained not to get angry, and I'm saying that this makes them helpless
So
and paralyzed.
what is appropriate anger?
Well, let's do a little thought experiment here.
Okay.
Can you give me some examples of what it looks like when people dump?
Sure. A man yelling at his wife, you know, the typical the child abuser or the parent or the wife abuser.
So yelling, abuse, violence. Good.
Violence. Throwing things, breaking things.
Sure.
You know, storming out of the room.
Yeah.
Road rage.
Tempers, road rage, great. What
Okay.
else?
Let's see. Passive aggressive behavior.
You bet. You'll never know that I got angry, but boy, I'll get even.
Thank you. That's the best definition of passive aggressive I've heard.
Yeah.
So I don't get angry. I just get even.
Right. And you never know where the knife came from, and you only discover it after you started bleeding. There was a time I was good at that.
So what was it? Trump's wife said, "Don't get even, get everything."
Right.
Got it. Okay. So that's anger. That's still
I'm still calling that dumping,
Got it. Okay.
because there's no power in that. It's just making a mess that somebody else has to clean up.
Okay. So how does that?
Blaming.
So that's acting it out. You're going to do something to another person.
Or how about a professional victim? Whining,
Okay. So
making a mess that somebody else has to clean up.
All right. So you're gonna. So how is that? That's still acting out. So anytime you're acting your anger out.
Right. Making a mess that somebody else has to clean up.
Got it. Making a mess somebody has to clean up. I'll remember that.
So, what about suppression? Depression is one good example. Can you think of any others?
Suppression. Well, you know, work with a few addicts myself. So people that cut themselves, people that do
Absolutely.
alcohol, you know, drink,
Addiction.
painkillers.
Yep.
Anything that I guess workaholism,
You sure? Gambling,
gambling.
sex.
Funny. This is actually, it seems so natural when you start talking about it. Sex, affairs.
Yep.
Or is that considered to be acting out?
Could be. Either way.
Okay,
And
so
some of these things cross the line depending upon how you do it. Do you make
Okay.
a mess, or are you just out there kind of self-destructively?
Okay.
And how about chronic pain? Now, obviously,
Oh,
there are
sure.
people with chronic pain that has a simple physical basis, but
Sure.
most of my patients with chronic pain have more going on than that.
One of my favorite quotes is by Woody Allen. He says, "I don't get angry. I just grow tumors."
Perfect.
So that's again,
Illness.
illnesses. So when we
Irritable bowel syndrome in your gut.
got it. So constipation. we're going through the bodily areas here.
Sure.
Okay. So so suppression is shows up in anything that sort of is implosion,
Yes.
whether it's physical, emotional, or
Codependency is another good example of this. And so codependency
anger
is
suppressed.
suppressed anger. It's the I don't trust myself, but I'm going to take over your life and make your life work and try to
Oh, no
control you.
kidding.
But it's all my frustration, feeling out of control, feeling overwhelmed. So I'm going to take over you and fix you.
so the savior is
Right.
someone who's always the self-appointed hero. All these people are also
Right, because actually,
Suppressing
let's face it, when I fix you, you're not going to get fixed right. You're going to screw it up. It has to happen. So then I get to blame you and dump on you.
So I can move from my suppressed anger to my acting out
Sure.
anger.
And-
Okay.
and there's
so
a
the
whole
first you said
game going there.
You said the first anger was making a mess that somebody else has to clean up,
Dumping,
dumping, and so what's the second?
suppression, constipation.
Which is constipation.
Right, which we
So
just
now
talked about
instead
that.
of making a mess that somebody else is going to have to clean up, I'm going to be the sacrificial anode
Right,
of this whole thing. Okay.
right.
And so
And I'm going to be helpless and pathetic.
okay. So where do we go from here?
Well, can you give me an example of appropriate anger?
Oh well, you've mentioned I know Mother Teresa.
Sure.
Who, I always say that anger is an inappropriate expression of a conviction. So anytime somebody's really committed to something or acknowledging a boundary, like setting a boundary.
Let's get to Mother Teresa in a minute. I want to do something, because,
Okay.
I don't know about you, but I'm not a saint. So,
No. I tried. I was a monk for 8 years, but
yeah, okay. So let's think of some kind of more ordinary ways that people can express anger appropriately.
Appropriate anger. Well, I like Gandhi, passive resistance, where you basically say no. You just say no.
But from a position of power.
Anger
And
appropriate anger. I guess it's pretty unfamiliar.
I don't think there are good models in our culture. Let me give you some examples that have come up with me in discussions with my patients and stuff. Let's imagine that you're in a meeting and Joe is, the clown in the meeting, and Joe drives everybody crazy. He's always coming up with these dumb ideas. Well, you could yell at Joe or belittle him. That's dumping, and all you're going to do is make Joe more Joe, and you're just going to strengthen that whole thing. Or you can check out, and then Joe takes over the meeting, and it's like, oh my God, this is a mess.
Okay.
But you could say to everybody, hey, let's do it this way. And you do it with strength, because the anger informs you. So it comes out, well, let's do it this way.
So leadership.
Yes, but there's a particular flavor to it. There's a but it's not harsh or hostile. It's strong.
Done with intention.
Yes.
Okay.
And conviction. So I think that we come back to your conviction. And it can be very simple, and it shifts everything immediately. Everybody goes, yeah. So the whole room shifts. And there's not a lot of work involved. So strength is not a lot of work. Weakness is hard work. Dumping is hard work, because then you have to clean up the mess.
So appropriate anger is expressing our strengths.
Right. Now, how do you handle a 3-year-old who's being a complete brat? You set limits. And you don't yell at the 3-year-old. You don't blame the 3-year-old. You don't check out and say, well, I can't handle you. You do whatever you want, sweetheart. You say, no.
One of the things I learned from my sister, she said, children love structure.
Absolutely.
So you create structure and you hold it strong.
But the point about structure is that it isn't a personal attack. It's holding strength.
System.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
So that's another example of that. Because, the thing about anger, and I think this is a critical insight, if I am in a situation and something happens and I go, wait a minute, there may be very well something going on that I have to pay attention to where I've got to fix something. This is not all right. Somebody's trying to take advantage of me or something like that. And so sometimes anger is a wake-up call to say, hello, pay attention, and there's a real shot of energy to do something about it. And it's about the specific situation around me. But if I'm angry over and over and over again in the same situation, and it's kind of like I keep creating these situations with all kinds of different people, and it just seems more and more like, why am I doing this? And people get mad at me for sucking them into my drama. Mm-hmm. Well, then clearly it's not about them, it's about me. Then what I get to do, if I want to do the work, is own the anger and say, wait a minute, this is not a message about somebody else. It's a message about me. One critical part of this understanding is that when I have a strong emotion, the emotion brings a lie. It brings a statement that is not true.
A lie.
A lie.
And this is now, so this isn't just anger.
This is any emotion.
Okay.
So when you're happy, for that moment that you're totally happy, that everything's wonderful. It's always been wonderful. It always will be wonderful. Life is grand.
In that moment.
Right.
What's the lie?
Well, life changes. It will go from one thing to the next. That sense that it's always been wonderful, yeah, it's true for the moment.
I see. So every strong emotion kind of brings a veil over us and says, this is going to be forever.
Sure.
Okay. Is that the lie you're talking about?
The lie is the shift in, an example is, if you remind me of something that I don't like in myself, then I'm going to blame you. And so there's a whole distortion that happens in there. There's a distortion in my thinking. If I'm sad, everything's always been awful, it always will be awful, it's hopeless.
So if I'm not appropriately expressing any emotion, whether it's anger or whatever, there's going to be a lie attached to how I express it.
Emotions contain the seeds of their own. There's a top layer distortion that you've got to sit with because it's not true. Then there's the fire or whatever the core of the emotion is, and then underneath that there's something that is much quieter, which is self. Let me bring up one other picture. Have you ever run from a monster in a dream?
Sure.
Okay, so here you are running from a monster, and most of us can't tolerate running from a monster. But let's say you can do this for a little while without waking up. What happens?
If you run from a monster?
Sure.
Usually you wake up before he catches you.
Sure. But in those few seconds before you wake up, what happens?
You run it. I mean, you're basically, it's funny. It's like you're running away from him, but you're seeing him and he's getting bigger and bigger.
Right. What's happening to you?
You're getting more and more afraid and
smaller and more paralyzed.
That's right. He gets bigger and you get smaller.
Why?
Why? Because when you the fear is feeding this experience.
Precisely. Your fear sucks your energy out of you, makes you paralyzed, and feeds the monster.
Right.
Now, think of that monster as strong emotion that you reject.
It's a brilliant, makes sense. Good.
Okay. So, most people will do everything in their power to get away from that monster, which merely makes that monster stronger.
Right. And you mentioned we're in a culture where anger is a monster.
Right. So,
Got it.
if you're in the dream and you want to do something differently, what can you do?
Well, you can face the monster, I guess.
What do you do? So, you face the monster and what?
Well, you fight it. Ordinarily. Well, I'm not sure. Well, hopefully you make it your friend.
So, this monster is rushing up to you, and what do you do?
How do you face a monster in a dream?
You grab it and dance.
Okay.
And at that moment, pop goes the soap bubble, the illusion pops. And this is where Beauty and the Beast legend comes.
Sure.
This is where kissing the frog and it turns into a prince comes. The monster turns into what it really was, which was a part of you that you rejected and demonized.
It's fascinating. This is not obvious, but it's very intuitive. When
Yeah,
you hear
you
these
can feel
answers. So the way you heal and integrate pain or painful emotion is to dance with it?
Yes. Surf
Okay.
it.
So,
Ride it.
So, and you're calling that radical acceptance.
I am.
What is radical acceptance?
Radical acceptance is the notion that most of the ideas you have about the parts of you that are awful are full of it. They're just nonsense. So all your judgments and evaluations are, in fact, maybe true in some respects, but mostly not really. They're not actually true. So you're walking around with all these ideas about how you're awful and how all these things are unacceptable, which never were true. And you've given tremendous power to those ideas which weren't right. And there's a long discussion about where they came from and where they're residing. There's an inner critic thing and so forth. But a lot of us are judgment and evaluation-aholics. Radical acceptance is where you don't buy into and empower judgment and evaluation, but you actually accept deliberately. And this is an active, aggressive, powerful thing to do. You accept what is happening to you in the moment.
You use this body motion where you come in kind of on your stomach and
Right.
hold this, like you're holding a stone at your stomach.
You actually create a nest, a nurturing, compassionate nest for the strong emotion, and give it a safe place to be, and then hang out with it. And then my thing is always putting your feet up on the table, getting out the popcorn, and watching this thing happen. So you're...
and this thing is your emotion.
Right, or whatever it is. And so let's say I'm really, really, really mad. And I've been mad a million times before. This is not that person's fault. I know this intellectually, but boy, I feel really mad. And I'm sorry for myself. I'm on the pity pot.
Okay.
I'm
okay.
just, so, oh, that's interesting. Wow.
Wow, I'm really mad.
Yeah. Well, wait a minute. Da 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 da. Oh, good. Well, I can't accept this. All right. So we're actually talking about one of the techniques of radical acceptance,
So
which
what
is
if you
mindfulness.
can't? What if you can't accept your anger? What if you can't like slow down and stuff it? Or what if you can't process it?
Great. So you have that. You accept that.
So you accept that you can't accept it.
Precisely.
And what is it? And that's the same thing. You just take whatever it is and you just embrace it.
Right.
At whatever level you can.
And the idea is to create a safe space to hold it in, of equanimity, of being present in the experience to the extent that you can tolerate it. And if you get flooded, then you're present in being overwhelmed. And so whatever happens, it's okay, basically because I use the First Amendment, my power of free speech, to say this is okay in this moment.
So instead of judging it or resisting it.
No, I have all my judgments and resistances. Are you kidding? They don't go away.
Oh, okay. So you embrace your judgments and resistances.
Absolutely.
Fascinating. So whatever comes, you're embracing.
Absolutely. And sock it to me.
You take the emotion with all its baggage and
Well,
the
sure.
social.
It's a package deal. You can't have the emotion and not have all this other stuff that goes along with
So
it.
do you have like an affirmation that goes through your mind where you say, I'm okay, I can accept this too. I can accept
No,
this too.
it's the I can't stand this. Neat. That's great.
So it's kind of like, oh, look at that.
Right.
Oh, look at that.
Precisely.
Over and over.
Minute by minute. So one way to do this is a technique called mindfulness, which is actually minute by minute doing what we're talking about. And there's lots of great stuff in the logosphere and on the internet, and there's books and tapes and so forth about mindfulness. And it's becoming a very powerful tool. There's good science now showing that it's effective in chronic pain.
Mindfulness.
Mindfulness.
This is really fascinating. There was a study, I remember the study where they had people in a convalescent home had regrets. And the top 3 regrets, number 1 was, I wish I had spent more time in reflection.
Yes.
You're talking about mindfulness.
Yes.
And the second is, I wish I'd taken more risk. And the third was, I wish I'd have left something of lasting value behind.
Well, this is the lasting value part comes after you've done the work, because this is actually doing the work. This is creating a safe space to feel the stuff that you can't accept.
And that's a risk.
It is. And it's work because you keep winding up in situations where you have no idea what to do and accepting that.
So if you can't tolerate your anger.
Then you have not tolerating it. Get out the popcorn.
Got it. So you
not literal popcorn, by
right,
the way.
you embrace. I understand.
That's stuffing it.
Yeah. Our viewers are looking for the popcorn is the answer to anger. And
Yeah, no.
So extraordinary maturity, I'm going to summarize here, comes from radical acceptance of emotions through mindfulness.
Right. And journaling, there's journaling techniques you can do.
Journaling, say more about that.
Good.
'Cause I've heard a lot about journaling, but I haven't had the breakthrough experience some people have had.
Journaling, there's a particular way to do this that is in a book I recommend to a lot of people. Julia Cameron wrote a book called The Artist's Way,
Okay.
which basically takes as its proposition that the most profoundly human thing we can be is artistic or expressive or creative in some way, whatever the way is appropriate for us. But to clear the deck so you can get at that creativity, you've got to kind of be able to get stuff out. So the first part of that book is about what she calls morning pages, where you write down 3 pages every morning of whatever comes to your mind, and you don't edit it. However, if you start to edit it, you write down the edit. So it's very similar to mindfulness. You just write down, dump, no editing, whatever comes to mind.
And so how does journaling work?
You just write down a brain dump,
It's a
whatever
brain
it is.
dump.
Yeah, and it's okay to piss and moan. It's okay to do a to-do list. It's okay to have no idea what you're saying.
And that's how we accept whatever's going on for us emotionally.
Absolutely.
Does journaling open up that emotion in a healthy way, or does
Yes.
it?
Typically, you'll find out all kinds of stuff about you you never knew. And again, it comes from this perspective of being accepting of your emotions and or whatever it is that comes out. And actually, the most powerful moment in this journaling process is when you have nothing to say. And then you write down whatever your version is, nothing, 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 I have nothing to say, this is really boring, I hate this. And you just keep writing out whatever that is. And then after a few minutes of accepting nothing, something opens up and something else comes out. And sometimes that's really neat.
So this sounds like the kind of thing where I'm not really going to experience this unless I actually do it.
It's work.
It is work.
It's work.
3 pages a day is a lot of work.
Half an hour.
I don't love.
And you can't do it on a computer. It's got to be handwritten.
Right.
By the way, get a shredder. This is for nobody else to see. It's really, because, you know,
You
who
write
wants
it and toss it.
You shred it. Who wants to read me pissing and moaning?
Is that what most of that journaling is about?
Can be. It can be a wonderful creative idea. It can be a to-do list. There's lots
So
of
that's
stuff.
it. It's as simple as that. That you're saying that people that are experiencing inappropriate rage, suppression, explosion, the way to really process this is to just radically accept through journaling
Well, here's the
and
thing.
mindfulness.
It's critical to get that. If your judgments and evaluations are wrong,
Okay.
then the truth is you have no idea what's going on in your head. You're clueless. You
If
have all
your
these beliefs.
judgments and evaluations are wrong, you have no idea what's going on in your head.
Right.
Say more about that.
Well, because in fact, when you're in a place that's really genuine, it's like a kaleidoscope. It's just shifting from one thing to the next. It's in movement. It's dynamic. And this dynamism has a real energy and strength to it.
So can you give me an example of how this has affected someone's life?
No. It's too hard to do that. Basically, you can see the effects of this, but and I'm struggling here.
Can you give me an example down through history of a person that we might not know used journaling and radical acceptance to make their lives work?
I think when people do this, they are better able to act out their strong commitments in a way that where you just want to follow this person along and they're just yummy. They're just really neat people and you just really like being with them. They may not be important or charismatic, but they're present in a way that you kind of fall in love with them.
Yeah, for me personally, those people are people that have extraordinary self-confidence and self-esteem.
But see, if you don't have extraordinary self-confidence and self-esteem, you can't act it, what do? Well, once you get through all the stuff that you don't like about yourself,
right,
then, what's to hide from?
So even though they may not be in a place of self-confidence, they might be in a place of self-acceptance.
Sure.
And that's pretty seductive.
You bet.
Pretty impressive stuff. Okay, well, we've got 1 minute left, so if you can summarize for our viewers the essence of today's show.
I've been talking about extraordinary maturity, which is a stage of growing up that we don't know much about in our culture. You'll see it in monastic orders, monasteries and that kind of places. So throughout the world, many spiritual centers develop this. You'll see it in the 12-step programs and not a lot of other places in our culture. But it involves a profound self-acceptance and a letting go into yourself, letting go of your judgments, letting go of having to know, and particularly working through the things that you can't stand about yourself and creating a nurturing space for them and processing them, working them through from the perspective that you don't know what's going on, and you can get out the proverbial popcorn, put your feet up and watch this happen and be surprised. And what happens is that as you do this, you become enlivened, because all the little things that you've rejected, along with rejecting those, you reject a chunk of yourself. So this is like retrieving your soul.
Embracing with radical acceptance.
You bet.
Thank you, Jim. This has been enlightening. Hope you enjoyed the show. Dr. Jim Gagné and Radical Acceptance for Extraordinary Maturity. Thanks for watching. That was